So Tuesday we talked about tort law in general, kind of the purposes behind tort law, the different kind of damages that are available in tort law. We talked about specific torts, torts that are against property, both real property and personal property. We talked about torts that are against persons. And the one thing that all of the torts had in common on Tuesday, from Tuesday's lecture, is that they were intentional. Okay? They all required that the actor intended the action. Next week, we're going to have a whole discussion about unintentional torts, but everything we talked about Tuesday required intent. Today, we are going to talk about the case of Dykstra versus Darling. So we're going to see a tort law case, a real tort law case, and kind of talk through it. And then there is a fact pattern between my friends Johnny and Rusty that if you haven't read yet, we'll take a minute and you can read it in a second. It's pretty short. But that's what we'll do for the second part of class. Just to reiterate what's due and everything this week, there is going to be a quiz over Unit 4, but Unit 4 is 2 weeks. So you have nothing due this Tuesday. The quiz will cover this week and next week and be due the following Monday. There is a discussion question this week that you'll need to take care of at some point. All right, any other questions on that? We're good? All right, let's talk about the case then of Dykstra versus Darling. So I told Mr. Wilmot that I would put him on the spot since he's a baseball player, and this is a baseball case. And he, I don't know that he agreed to it, but he didn't say no. So here we are. Tell us, Warwick, who Dykstra and Darling are. Give us some background on this case.
So, Lenny Dykstra and Ron Darling were teammates, playing for the Mets together.
Right.
And they did not, I don't know if Lenny Dykstra didn't like Ron Darling, but Ron Darling did not like him.
Well, we know that probably Dykstra doesn't like him anymore. But yeah, you're right. Darling hated Dykstra.
Darling did not like the way he treated people, the way he carried himself throughout life and on the field. He was both a prick in both cases. And when writing his book, Darling, he recalled an incidents with Dykstra being just a total D-bag. And Dykstra did not like that and took him to court.
That's a legal term, total D-bag. I like that. All right, so Dykstra took him to court. Darling wrote a book in which he told some stories about Dykstra that Dykstra claims are untrue, and he sued him. What did he sue him for, Warwick?
He sued him for tarnishing his reputation.
Right. What's the tort? What's the name of that tort? You know it. Defamation. Good. He sued him for the tort of defamation. We talked on Tuesday about how in tort cases, the plaintiff is looking for damages, right? To compensate them or to punish the wrongdoer. What kind of damages, anybody, did Dykstra ask for in this case? All right, it's punitive damages. I heard that from Mr. Hare, right? That would have been to punish Darling under the theory that Darling was lying, right? Where we'd have to assume that he was lying to believe Dykstra's damages. What else did you say? Loss of, okay, mental anguish. Is that a punitive damage or a compensatory damage? It's compensatory, right? In fact, I think he wanted to be compensated for a few things. Who sees that in there? Work.
Loss of standing in the entertainment.
Okay. Y'all are both right? Yep. So he asked for all the damages he could think of to get, right? All right. So if we're going to use our legal vocabulary, who's the plaintiff then in the case, Ward?
Dykstra.
Dykstra, right. He brought the case. So the defendant would be Ron Darling, okay? And the case is for defamation, and Dykstra seeking damages, both compensatory and punitive damages. Good. And this is all based on, as Mr. Wilmot pointed out, stuff that happened back in the 80s. And Dykstra's now writing a book about it. I think it came out in 2019, if I'm right. That's what it said. And so Dykstra sues. Are we in the federal court system or the state court system? State court system, that's right. We're in the New York state court system. So Dykstra is suing under the New York law for defamation. I hate how New York names their courts because it's so confusing. They call their trial courts, their entry-level courts, Supreme Court, which is just backwards, right? We think of Supreme Court as being the highest level court you could go to. But they call theirs Supreme Court. So when you see it say Supreme Court, New York Supreme Court, it's really an entry-level trial court. All right, so did the case, Warwick, make it all the way to trial?
No,
It got dismissed before this. It didn't actually have a trial on it. Is this a civil lawsuit or a criminal lawsuit? Civil lawsuit. Good. Y'all are doing good with your vocabulary. All right, we talked about different kinds of defamation. Would this have been libel or slander? Libel, because it was written. Good. Excellent. Y'all got good answers. All right. I'm going to read a couple of highlights from the passage of the book that the legal opinion quotes, and I want y'all to tell me what you think of it. Dykstra was an a-hole. He was one of baseball's all-time thugs. He gets away with murder, murder being a figurative term. He was a criminal in every sense and a crappy human being. He yelled, and he alleges that he yelled the foul, racist, hateful, hurtful stuff. How much of that is defamatory in your estimation? How do y'all analyze that? What about calling somebody an a-hole? Defamatory? Why not? It's an opinion. All right, good. What about thug? I can look up thug in the dictionary and it has a definition. More opinion or more fact? What do you think, Rianne? Still opinion? Still opinion, I think you're probably right. What about where he says, there always seems to be a guy in every organization, every walk of life who gets away with murder? What do you think about that one, Ms. Marshall? Is that defamatory? Could be. What's the argument that it is? He's generalizing. We could say that's a figure of speech, right? I mean, we're all pretty familiar with the phrase gets away with murder. But if I'm Dykstra's lawyer, I'm going to say what? He called me a murderer. What did Dykstra write after that kind of hedged his bet there a little bit? You think maybe the lawyers came in and read that and added that little clause after gets away with murder? See what he says? Murder being a figurative term in this case. In other words, I'm not literally calling him a murderer. What about being a crummy human being? Opinion or fact? Probably still opinion. All right, well, Dykstra took exception to this and he sued for it. And before we even got to trial, Darling asked the court to dismiss the charges. He asserts a defense to defamation that is, well, I'll ask you, what is Darling's defense, first of all, to the defamation allegation? What is it, Ward? Go ahead. His reputation was already so bad that I couldn't have heard it anymore. Right? Tort law is about being compensated for harm. And Darling's argument is, I couldn't harm him any more than he already had harmed himself. There's nothing for him to be compensated for. What do we call that? What did the case call that defense? Libel proof doctrine, right? The libel proof doctrine. So notice that Darling is not saying, I didn't say those things. I mean, it's pretty easy to prove. He wrote them in his book, right? He's not saying I didn't write them. He's also not saying that they're true. He believes they're true, but he's saying it does. Even if they were false, Dykstra's reputation is so bad that it couldn't be harmed anymore. All right, what is what is Dykstra's response to that? What do his lawyers say? He makes some decent arguments. At least some arguments you can make with a straight face. You're Dykstra's lawyers now. Darling has said, Judge, he's libel proof. Go ahead.
Well, he said that this was forever branded as a racist, and that, well, he claimed that it obviously did hurt the reputation. This is because of everything looking at that.
It seems to me that the court obviously didn't buy Dykstra's argument, but that might be an issue for trial to see whether Dykstra could actually prove that he had lost business opportunities or been denied endorsements or that he lost earnings opportunities. But that's one of the arguments he makes. Good. That it forever branded him a racist and it further tarnished his reputation. What else does he say? What else is a good argument for Dykstra? Good. It's not like if we call somebody a criminal, we can look and see if they have a criminal record or not. That's pretty good evidence. We call somebody a thug and a racist and a misogynist and a homophobe. There's nothing we can go to that's going to list whether or not somebody has been arrested or charged or found guilty of those allegations. So that was another argument Dykstra made. All right, so then we move on to the part of the case where you'll see how the court applies the New York law of defamation to the facts of this case. So at the top of page 3, the court talks about the elements of defamation under New York law. In other words, what the plaintiff would have to prove in court to establish defamation. All right, so they're numbered. What all work does Dykstra have to prove here? One at a time. False statement, all right. And we don't get into whether he can prove this or not, right? Because the case got dismissed. But if we were to go to trial, he would have to prove that what Darling said was false. Yep, what's number 2? Published to a third party. What's the third one? And constituting fault at a minimum and negligence standard. And then number 5, that causes harm, right? All right, well, let's go through that. Let's pretend there was a trial for a second. Who has the burden of proof in the case if we went to trial? Who has to prove this? The plaintiff does, right? Dykstra does. So he's got to prove a false statement. You're Dykstra's lawyers. How are you going to do that? You're going to ask Darling maybe in discovery what evidence he has, try to figure out what the basis of it is. Yeah. What's going to be your biggest challenge then, Caleb, with that line of discovery or proof, line of proof? For either of them.
Well, it happened 30 years ago.
Happened 30 years ago. There's no video of it, your case says, right? Really, it's he said, she said. What if Dykstra could bring in witnesses that could say, I didn't hear him say that. It's not the same thing as he didn't say it, right? Darling can bring in witnesses that says, oh, I heard him say that. We're not really going to have a definitive record of that. So proving a false statement is hard. It's going to be hard for Dykstra in this case. Did these statements get published to a third party? Yeah, they got put in a book. So that no argument as to that. Did Dykstra give his permission? Was there authorization for that? No, he didn't. He was not happy about it. And then he would have to prove, obviously, that Darling was at fault and that the statements caused harm. So Dykstra would have had a pretty tall hill to climb, I would think, in court to make out his case for defamation. But again, we didn't get there. So the court in the opinion talks about the interests that the court has to balance in a case like this or in any defamation case. What were those interests? Right. Excellent. The harm to a person's reputation, we do as a society want to protect that, right? That is an interest that is recognized, that people should not be defamed or, had false stuff said about them that harms them. Then on the other hand, we have the interest of freedom of speech. So the court is balancing those two things. Warwick, how common is the libel proof doctrine? Does that get used by courts often or rarely?
I would have to say it is used often.
The other one.
It's not.
It's used rarely. Good. That's all right. I am putting you on the spot, but it's okay. I'm not expecting y'all to be legal scholars. I appreciate your playing along. The opinion does say that to have somebody who's really libel proof that could not be defamed is kind of rare. But they did find it to be appropriate in this case. So we talked on Tuesday about the tort of defamation and how the rules are slightly different for public figures and private citizens. Dykstra in this case would be a public figure. So not only does he have to prove those 5 elements that we read out a minute ago, but then he's got to prove something in addition to those 5 elements. What was that? Anyone? Actual malice. Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Actual malice. How would you describe actual malice to me? Anybody? Right? You meant to cause it you knowingly or recklessly said something that was false. In other words, it wasn't accidental. There wasn't a justification for it. It wasn't a good faith mistake. You meant it to have harm. Now remember, I'm a private citizen. If I sue for defamation, I don't have to prove actual malice. But a public figure would have to do that. We didn't get that far again because we didn't make it all the way to trial in this case. All right. What was Dykstra's reputation like, Warwick, before Darling's book?
Already a criminal and not a great person.
All right. And how do we know that?
From looking at his history in the law, they could tell that he's been
He had a criminal record. Good. What else?
Other people's complaints about him.
Yeah, other people had said the same things. What about in the media?
Oh yeah, 2009 article says that his former employee said that he used racist.
Right. There were all kind of press stories that he had done these things before. And now pretend for a second, Warwick, that you have Lenny Dykstra on the witness stand and you're Darling's lawyer. And you're going to say to him, you claim that these are false statements that Ron Darling wrote, but these have all been written about you before. And why didn't you what? You never sued anybody else, did you, Mr. Dykstra? You're just going to sue Mr. Darling now because y'all have a beef and you don't like him and you're mad about it. Right. That would be a good way to attack him on the witness stand. In addition, Mason.
Darling's lying about that. Prove that, even with everything that's actually done.
All right, I'm going to hold on to that question because that's a great question. I want to ask that to everybody when we get done. Excellent question. If I have Dykstra on the witness stand and I'm going over all of the reasons why his reputation was already poor, the opinion points out something that Dykstra did, that'd be the first piece of evidence I would show him. What would that be? Did anybody catch this? How about Dykstra's autobiography, the book he wrote about himself that had a lot of this type stuff in it? Hey, Mr. Dykstra, you're going to sue Mr. Darling when you wrote most of this stuff about yourself at some point. Now, of course, he's going to say, well, I didn't call myself a racist or a sexual predator. But that would be a good line of questioning. All right, so the court concludes then, Mr. Wilmot, what does the court conclude in the case?
That Dykstra's reputation can't be tarnished further than what this book does.
All right, and so therefore he has no case for defamation. That's the conclusion. Excellent. Let's go to Mason's question for a second, which was, I'll repeat for my video viewers. What if this case had gone to trial and Dykstra had evidence that could prove that Darling was lying about him, that this story was in fact false? Then what do we think the jury would have done? There's no right or wrong answer to this question, let me say up front. So what do y'all think? What do you think, Mason? Would he still be labeled libel proof? That was really your question, right? So in other words, does that shield, can anybody say anything about Dykstra that they want to and be safe from getting sued? What do y'all think about that? What do you think, Rianne? Put yourself in Dykstra's shoes for a second. How do you feel about a court telling you that you're libel proof? No, it's not possible for anybody to say anything bad about you that everybody doesn't already know. What do you think about that, Moultrie? You made your bed, now you got to lie in it? What do you think, Mr. Garcia? What's your opinion on that question? The question about, is it possible that Dykstra is just libel proof no matter what? That even if Darling was lying, what do you say, Caleb?
I think if the courts put it in record that he had all these different things that make him libel proof, then that would hold up. But also, I don't think you can use defamation even if he had evidence that he was lying, because the requirement of it is that it has to cause harm, so if he is libel proof.
That is an excellent answer. Even if Dykstra wasn't libel proof, he's still got to prove harm. So if he went into court and proved that Darling was lying, that he had smoking gun proof that Darling made this up, he didn't really yell racist things at the opposing player in the World Series, he's still got to show harm. Now, could he in theory show harm? He could. It would be hard, though. To Caleb's point, it'd be very hard for him to. In future cases, it'd be really good to have a written opinion from a court already that says he's libel proof, wouldn't it? I mean, Darling's just not put himself, to Ms. Norman's point, he's not put himself in a good position. And it's really by his own doing. All right, so let me tweak the question a little bit. Let's take everything at face value here that that Dykstra is libel proof. Can anybody think of something that could be said or written about him that might get around it? Let me ask you a different way. Can you think of something that Ron Darling could have written in his book that Dykstra would have had a good argument for defamation for? Some kind of insane criminal accusation? Keep going. Like what? Okay, that he did some kind of. I mean, we've already said he was a criminal. I mean, a criminal. So, but the line of argument is right. What were you going to say, Ms. Marshall? Called him a pedophile or a child molester? I think he'd been accused of some sexual stuff. But what do y'all think about that? Does that cross a line? You do? All right, what do you think about that, Moultrie? Is he still libel proof if somebody comes out and writes in a book that he raped children? Well, that's always a defense, right? Truth is always a defense. We're assuming it's false for a second. I'm just wondering how far this libel proof doctrine goes.
I did that, then that should.
Right. I think you're probably right. I think he's libel proof to the extent that people are going to say things about him that have already been said or that are consistent with the nature of his behavior. But if somebody were to allege something that was worse than that, I could see where maybe he wouldn't be libel proof for that. But it goes back to Caleb's point, which was in order to recover, you still got to be able to prove damages. And that would have been hard for Dykstra to overcome in the case. But, I mean, let's say that he had an endorsement deal. I can't imagine what company would want to hire Lenny Dykstra to pitch their products, but let's say he had one. And Darling wrote in his book that Dykstra was a child molester, and as a result of that, the company dropped him. That would be good evidence, pretty good proof of damages. So it's not inconceivable. You just have to think through how that would look. All right, what do y'all think? One observation on this case can be anything. I'm going around the room. I'm starting over here. What's your observation on this case? Any thought?
He's already had everything he wrote about himself was out there. It was he should have just left it alone.
Judge Marshall says this is the right decision, right? And it doesn't. Your observation doesn't have to be whether they got it right or wrong. It could be anything. Hare, what you got? Reputation is fluid. That's a good observation. Yeah. Certainly our discussion today proved that, doesn't it? Mr. Oster, what do you say? Any observations? You feel bad for Mr. Dykstra? A little bit? Lauren, what do you think? What do you think, Mr. Henry? What do you mean by that?
Like, I feel like politicians argue all the time, right? And then, like, they know that history will be fair. But, like, I feel like, if they had, like, a little bit more, like, integrity, like, they would, like, they would know that history was fair. Like, I feel like, politicians argue all the time, right? And then, like, they know that history will be fair.
So the actual malice requirement for public figures makes it a little harder, right? I mean, you're right. Politicians say horrible things about each other. They flat out lie on all sides of the aisle. I'm not picking on anybody. I mean, you watch any political ad and you're like, that's not true on both sides.
I'm not taking either side. I'm just okay. I feel like it's more parallel to the Simon Garfunkel part. That like no, it's not Simon Garfunkel. Daryl Hall and John Oates.
Hall and Oates.
One of them actually said basically took away my creativity and basically filed a restraining order against each other.
So we got a Hall and Oates reference in Business Law this morning. I like it. Mr. Alexander, what's your observation on this case? Okay. Warwick, thank you for being my playing along this morning, I guess. Let's say you did a great job. What's your observation?
My observation is your peers care as much about how you treat other people and how you talk to other people as much as they do with your interactions with them.
That's a good one. I like that. What do you think, Benny?
I know. It's not justified for effect, in my opinion. For example, if I live in the 70s, I ended up publishing a book again. I did some stuff where he didn't even do anything. I just don't like him. Did some stuff. That's basically the same thing. You cannot prove that basically right now, you cannot prove that I'm right. You cannot prove that I'm wrong. So I should still have the credit. And I still make him.
I like that. That's a good one. I love the observations you have as an outsider culturally or nationally is what I'm trying to say. That's really interesting to me.
Like for example, at home in Europe, I would say that for me, and I don't want to offend anyone here, but the American justice system for us Europeans, I think is so weird in a way that some of these stuff that happens are like would never happen in
All right, that's fascinating to me, and I don't disagree. What wouldn't happen that they wouldn't have sued them or they wouldn't have written it?
like maybe yes, you can sue them, but it's like our laws cannot be like bent that much. Like I'm trying to know and everyone here.
This is an offense-free zone. You're safe.
What I'm trying to say is that at home there are the laws and it's exactly how it is. So it's way like we have like cases like this way less, I think.
Not as many defamation cases. You think Americans in general are too easily offended? Yes. She said. France said yes. I like that. That is very valuable. I appreciate that. What do you think? How do you follow that one up?
I think that I would do the same about the Darling because writing all this stuff what happened, which is also bad, but it also sets us look good. Like a lot of bad statements.
Yeah.
It makes like money.
Darling made money off of it, didn't he?
Yeah. I can also understand like so I think I would do the same about the position because it's bad for my name.
Yeah.
So I understand both situations and it's kind of interesting because like Benny said, it's very reacting here with the laws.
Yeah.
Even if you would have lost this case, I think marketing, like it's such a good marketing for him. At home we have a saying that it's like bad marketing, good marketing doesn't matter because you're gonna get the thing.
Yeah, we have something similar to that, which is like sometimes you'll hear any press is good press. Any attention is good attention, even bad attention. I think we see that in American politics too sometimes. Any attention is good attention. All right, Australia, what do you think?
I think, I don't know,
Anything strike you as weird or unusual about the case? If you're the judge, who are you for? Who would you have ruled for? Lenny? All right. So you would say that that Darling should not have said that about him? For what reason? Because it was wrong? How do we know it? How do we know it was wrong? You're not wrong. I'm just testing out your argument. That's all. So you're doing a good job of defending it. All right. I like that. Nathan?
The idea of having such a terrible reputation is really interesting to me. Like how much less loaded you think. But I guess I don't think that argument really applies to this because he's being accused of being like sexual assaulter and also being a racist. And those are things that you really can't be libel proof from. Because even if like people think of you as like an actor, if you are accused of being racist and like a sexual predator, people are going to like not want anything to do at all, including the people who would want anything to do with it.
That's an interesting point. If it is generally accepted that Professor Tebow is an a-hole, everybody agrees on that. Do I care that much? Or do I care as much as if everybody says that I'm a rapist? Do I care that people think I'm a jerk? Maybe not. Mr. Brooks's point is a good one. These things are, maybe Dykstra did have. Do you have a little bit of sympathy for Dykstra standing up for himself in this case? All right. South Africa, what do you say?
I think if he didn't have a reputation, if Dykstra didn't have a reputation before he went into the case, probably would have had a stronger argument against Darling. But because he went into the case with the reputation he had, I don't think he did much of a chance of the trial or getting anything out of it.
Kind of his own fault.
Yeah, I think he kind of went into it for publication, for press.
All right. I like that. France, what do you say? He got what he deserved? All right. What do you say, Moultrie?
Maybe so. I think that the court was right and like they had a good argument, but I think as the book was written, truly what if Dykstra was trying to change?
So that Sadie makes a great point. If you're libel proof, can you come back from that?
And there should be a people can change doctrine.
Yeah. I was libel proof at one time, but not anymore. That's really interesting. Possible. Did I ask you already what you thought? All right, what's your observation?
Well, that you should treat people well.
And you don't want to be sued, right? And have good lawyers. That's two pretty good lessons, I would say. What do you say, Ms. Robinson?
I would say if you're a public figure anyway, you should be aware of one, your reputation and what's already out there. And two, you still have to prove at the end of the day, like, this is not right or,
I like that. How do you feel about that if you're a public figure? I mean, people can take shots at you to some extent. People have opinions. They're going to say stuff. Good. What do you say, Ms. LaFavor?
I think Dykstra knew that the court wasn't going to go through with it. I mean, because of the way, I don't think that you normally have a good court, you normally have a good case.
Sue him and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Well, wonder if by suing Darling, even though he lost, would that make people think twice about trash talking Dykstra in the future?
Not at all.
No?
I think it kind of like
I might, because I'm like, oh, that guy sues people, and I just as soon not get sued. I mean, even if I'm right, I just would not have to go through the trouble of getting sued. So maybe he was making a point. What do you say, Caleb?
I think it would have been interesting to say or to see like one part right here report really only talks about his like legal history of non-payment, breach of contract, charge of lewd conduct, and assault with a deadly weapon, which I don't really feel like are relevant to like the defamation suit
All right.
at hand. Like Darling just accused him of being racist.
I like that.
So I think it would've
Interesting.
been interesting to see like.
So the
why
court
they-
kind of used his criminal history, his criminal reputation to say that people can call you a racist.
Right, but they did say that prior to this, papers submitted showed that he was infamous for being racist. So I
Yeah.
think it would have been interesting to see that.
So that you would have liked to have seen the judge support his decision with the evidence that Dykstra was the things Darling accused him of, rather than maybe some of the other stuff. Very interesting. Did anybody pick up on when the judge at the very end of the opinion, what was he basically saying to Dykstra? What was his attitude toward that? Yeah, you've wasted my time. We've got people who have had real losses, who have, there have serious things, and you're suing about something that somebody may or may not have said 30 years ago. And oh, by the way, nobody was surprised to hear that about you. But yet we're having to take up our time and resources and all that on this case. Judge wasn't real happy about it. All right, pull up, if you have not read, and even if you have, review the fact pattern between Rusty and Johnny that is posted to the Unit 4 content. All right, well, that's actually... Okay, can anybody not read that? Okay. Anybody that doesn't already have it in front of them. I think it looks like pretty much everybody's got a tablet, so we're probably good. All right, this exercise is about identifying torts. And I want us to use our vocabulary, our legal vocabulary, and identify what possible torts and defenses to torts that we might have. So who would like to go first? Who can spot a tort? Who spies, I spy a tort? Who spies a tort in this fact pattern? Oh, I'll tell you what, let's do it a different way. Let's make everybody from Benny over. Benny and Peter, Mr. Peter. Well, you're on this side. Yeah, you're. Yep, that's right. Alexander, you, Mr. Woods, and Wilmot, y'all are all on this side. All right, so you guys are Rusty's lawyers. You guys from Benny over are Johnny's lawyers. All right, so we'll go back and forth. Start with Rusty's lawyers. What do y'all want to sue for? Give me one thing. We're going to see if we can find them all. All right, Miss Marshall says you're going to sue Johnny for assault. All right, because why? All right, give me the specific facts that support your assault claim. All right, the kicking in the head. All right, that's one count of assault. All right, what are you going to have to prove then, Miss Marshall, to make out your case for assault on that? Right, but what are the elements of assault that we have to have? Johnny had to put Rusty in fear, right? Fear of harm. Maybe not, well, fear for your life is fear of harm for sure. But for assault, it's just fear of harm. Okay. So was it the actual contact that you're alleging in the assault, or was it the action of the kicking? Is the action of the kicking, because she said assault, right? All right. Johnny's lawyers, y'all have any defense to that? Probably not, but I'm open to any and all defenses. So even if they're ridiculous, I want to hear them. All right, what else, Rusty's lawyers? What else are you going after Johnny for? Trespass to land. All right, tell me about that.
Johnny snuck onto Rusty's roof at night and swiped Rusty's Christmas decorations.
All right, so he would have gone without permission up onto the roof. The act of going onto the property and up onto the roof. Where's the footage? All right, Johnny's lawyers are speaking up. What else do y'all have? What possible defenses can you think of there? Yes. Prank. So that would go to intent, right? I didn't intend to do any harm.
Well,
go ahead.
Rusty was woken up in the middle of the night and
we got an emotional distress claim coming, I feel like. What else, Johnny's lawyers? What is it about Rusty's property? What is one of the things about Rusty's property that Johnny may have a good argument for?
His shop reputation as well, because it's across the street.
Yeah, but Rusty or Johnny operates what? It's a business. I mean, I can go on Johnny's property to fill my gas tank up, right? I'm not trespassing. What's your response to that, Rusty's lawyers? There you go. Well, that's not, we wouldn't normally expect customers to go on the roof. Good. I like the way Benny's thinking. This is going to make a good lawyer one day. All right, so while he's on the roof then, Rusty's lawyers, anything else y'all can think of to sue for? All right, emotional distress. Tell me about that one, Mr. Alexander. All right, hold on to that one for a second. That's definitely a tort, and we'll get there. Let's stay on the roof for a second. The going on the roof, Rusty's lawyers have said, was trespass to land. While he was up there, what else happened?
stole something, but I'm kind of fine.
All right, that's right. Use it. Like I used to tell my kids, use your words. You're right. You're looking for the right vocabulary, which is what I want you to do. Free speech was taken from the roof? What tort would that be? So Warwick said he stole it from the roof, which is true. But in this class, we're talking torts, not criminal law today. So in tort law, what torts could he have committed when he stole it? Say that again? Disparagement of property. Disparagement of property is more like defamation of property, of trash talking a product or a thing. Trespass to land, okay. Trespass to personal property, right. Yeah, I think you said trespass to property to begin with, and I should have determined whether we were talking about personal property or land. Certainly we have land. Conversion, because he walked away with it, right? All right, so maybe the going on the roof, I'm hearing three torts: trespass to land, trespass to personal property, and conversion. Good. Johnny, yep, what do y'all want to say about that?
It's not really a personal property. It's a convenience store that is owned by a business.
Ah.
Of course, he is the boss of the business, but that's not a person. Like, I don't think that's personal property.
So
Personal property, you have to be like a single person. I'd rather being a business.
can a tort be committed against the property owned by a business? I think so. I mean, it's still, yeah. All right, Johnny, y'all have gotten sued so far. Let's turn the tables. What do y'all want to? What kind of torts do you want to sue Rusty for?
Libel or slander? Banner.
All right, which banner?
Johnny's Go-Go sells hot dogs.
All right, so you're going to bring a defamation case for that? Is that libel or slander, Brooks?
I mean, it's written down, but it's like not permanently written down.
Interesting. It's more temporary than like a book, but it
But it still had a major effect.
it is libel because it's written. But I like the way I really like the way you're thinking about that. All right, so let me pause for a second. Rusty's lawyers, you've been sued for defamation for the banner that says Johnny's Go-Go sells hot dogs made from cat meat. Free speech and an opinion. All right, Johnny's lawyers, what do you say about that? That's not an opinion if you can disprove it or prove it. All right, what do you say about that? Okay, it was a what am I trying to say? Not figure of speech, but it was an insult, right? Not a hyperbole. That's what I was thinking of. Thank you, Mr. Hare. Good. Still messed up your reputation. Ooh, all right, Rusty wants to see what your damages are. Oh, that your hot dog sales dropped? Okay. All right. Good. All right. Johnny's lawyers, what else y'all got? Disparagement of property. Tell me about that.
Because it's when an economically injurious falsehood made about another's product or property.
Okay.
I feel like that same thing that we could sue for defamation. If that didn't work, we could sue them for disparagement of property for the same statement.
Aha, I agree with that. I like that. The hot dogs made from cats could lead to a disparagement of property case and a defamation case. What about Rusty? What about Johnny's retaliation for your sign by making T-shirts that says Rusty's One Stop Sucks? You're going to sue him for libel on that? What's your defense to that, Garcia? That's an opinion. What do you say about that? It said it's an opinion. Got to be a false statement of fact. Probably an opinion, right? Probably not. All right, Mr. Alexander, you had a good one a minute ago, and I just wanted to keep us going on the track we were. Tell me again what your tort is for. All right, emotional distress. All right, from the hacking you said. All right, is there a tort to be found in the hacking? Trespass to personal property. I think you're right. I agree with that. We got emotional distress, trespass to personal property. What else? There's another one. Well, the defamation what would the defamation be? I think the defamation would have to be a false statement of fact, assuming the pictures were real. If they weren't real, then they've got some other stuff going on. But what about invasion of privacy? That's a tort. The hacking in a computer could be invasion of privacy. All right. I get my people mixed up in this fact pattern. Johnny. No, who broke in? Rusty or Johnny? Johnny broke in? So Johnny's lawyers, you have any defenses to that? You've been sued for emotional distress, invasion of privacy, and trespass to personal property. He thought that Rusty was in distress. That's why he broke in the computer.
Well, ask for the evidence of how he hacked it.
How did he hack it?
I think he just, my client just had the piece of paper with the password on it.
Could have been that Rusty made the password known. Okay. Yes. It was somebody else did it, right? It wasn't me. It was him. Those. Are, yep. Oh, there you go. It was in an online dating account. That means that means Rusty was doing, or whoever the pictures are of was doing what? Sending them out himself to other people, presumably. Maybe. That might be something we want to figure out. Did I really invade your privacy if I published something that you yourself were publishing? Maybe still in this case. I mean, I think if I was Rusty's lawyer, I'd still feel strongly about that. But you see how it can shade both ways. All right, there's more torts in there. We got a couple more minutes.
I think we could sue them for invasion of privacy too.
All right, in what way?
For painting Johnny in a false light up in the picture of beware of coronavirus.
There we go. The tort of false light. I wrote this fact pattern like the spring when coronavirus came out, so it was a little more topical, I guess. But I mean, I don't know that if we accuse anybody of having coronavirus right now, that would be all that big a deal. But it was 4 years ago. So false light, that's right. I think we could make the case for that. What else? What about Rusty employing Beth and Johnny coming and stealing her away? Any tort there? Interference with a contractual relationship. Okay. Can Johnny's lawyers think of any defenses to that? Well, that's right. Well, okay, you're right. There would have to either there was a contract or there wasn't. But Johnny also has to what? Know about the contract. All he did was offer a better deal? Oh, I thought it did. Let me see. You may be right. No, it does say she has a contract. But I never said that Johnny knew about it. So you're right, Brooks. We would have to know that. Mr. Garcia is right. We'd have to prove that Johnny knew it.
Yeah, but you can go out it can be 10 grand a year.
He could have just said, how much do you make? That's right. Good. Very good. Y'all see how we have to make assumptions about some of the facts. And if we assume one way or another, it changes the whole complexion of whether or not there's a tort. I think there are probably some more assaults and batteries in the fight part that we could pick through if we really needed to, but I think y'all get the general idea of it all. I think this class works best when we talk, like today, and I learn more when you all share your observations with me than if I just stand up here and talk. So I appreciate that. I know everybody doesn't always like to be called on because then you have to pay attention and stay awake. But I think it makes for a much better class. So I appreciate that about y'all. Thank you. Have a good weekend. We'll see you Tuesday, and we'll finish up torts next week. If you came in late,